Lord of Mysteries. My Identities Echoes Across Time. Chapter 121 to 130. What exactly did Lynn hear that made him pause? It was, of course, the news that Saussure had just informed him. The ancient sun god, who was originally expected to return later, had come back early. He's really back, so suddenly. Did he bring back a bunch of new Divine Kingdom citizens? Switching his main consciousness to the second epoch, Lynn looked up at Saussure. His surprise was mixed with a touch of dread. He couldn't be blamed. Lynn and his companions had been overwhelmed by the people they had rescued from the land of the demonic wolf. They were already struggling to manage everything, and any more newcomers might just push him over the edge. This was when Lynn especially missed having subordinates. The reason he, Little Red, and Saussure were so busy was that the Divine Kingdom was still in its early stages of construction and lacked useful aids. Lynn glanced sympathetically at Saussure, feeling pity for the Deputy of Heaven who didn't even have a few senior secretaries to help with administrative tasks. Among the high-ranking individuals, apart from Saussure and the two temporary recruits, himself and Medici, everyone was a combatant. When it came to fighting, many would step forward, but as soon as it was about handling administrative duties, they scattered like birds. Lynn sighed inwardly, suddenly wishing he could travel back in time and give his past self, the one who volunteered to help Saussure, a good slap. Why did I even think it was a good idea? Lynn gave Saussure a resentful look, ready to resign immediately and focus on his Eye of Secrets, if the latter showed the slightest sign of agreement. I feel like you're thinking something very rude, Saussure sighed helplessly, rubbing his temples. But don't worry, the Lord didn't bring extra people back this time. He hesitated before adding, the Lord does have some restraint. Your face says otherwise. You look like you're about to drop dead, Lynn retorted bluntly, nudging Medici beside him. See, Little Red, if you willingly become a workhorse, Saussure's fate could be yours. It's a clear path to hell. So, isn't it better to slack off? Despite his slightly improved opinion of the ancient sun god after the trip to the land of the demonic wolf, Lynn's policy towards Little Red remained unchanged. He didn't mind Medici's loyalty to the ancient sun god, but absolute loyalty was out of the question. Why be loyal to the point of self-destruction, especially when it was your trusted one who betrayed you? Every time he thought of the hotpot spirit Medici in the fifth epoch, Lynn felt it wasn't worth it for Little Red. TCH. Medici snorted but didn't answer directly. Judging by his expression, Lynn knew his persistent advice to slack off was taking effect. At least don't say this right in front of me, Saussure sighed, watching the two interact. Of course, I'm saying it for your benefit too, so it has to be in front of you, Lynn retorted confidently. Saussure, you should know there's no future in being overworked. Even if you don't rebel against the Lord, you should at least secure some time to rest. Sure, as a king of angels, you don't need sleep and won't actually die from exhaustion, but can your spirit take it? Lynn continued vehemently, and I think you should request a few assistants from the Lord. They can learn if they don't know how to help. Even Little Red, a child on the war pathway, has managed to handle administrative duties decently after all these days. Why should you be exhausted while Aucuses and the others live it up? They should be dragged in to help too. Finally, his true intentions came out. It wasn't just about sharing the workload. Lynn wanted to drag the combat-oriented Aucuses and the others down as well. It's not just about fighting. Why should those who can fight get to enjoy life while I deal with administrative tasks? Lynn was feeling unbalanced. It's not that I haven't tried talking to Aucuses and the others, but they really aren't suitable, Saussure began to explain but then stopped, looking towards the door with a sudden realization. Lynn also turned to look, seeing the ancient sun god standing quietly at the entrance, unclear how long he had been listening. Despite his serene and mysterious demeanor, there was a compassionate look in his downcast eyes, which might have been an illusion on closer inspection. The atmosphere became awkward instantly. This was akin to badmouthing the boss and being caught red-handed. Lord, didn't you say you'd wait for Lynn and Medici in conference room 1? What brings you here personally? Is there something urgent? Saussure, worthy of being a nurturing figure, stood up resolutely and addressed the ancient sun god, breaking the awkward silence. I got a bit bored waiting, So I decided to come over myself, the ancient sun god replied warmly, showing no signs of anger. He then turned to Lynn and Medici. It seems Sorcerer has been taking good care of you, which reassures me. You might be a bit too reassured. I am an undeniable troublemaker, and with the straightforward hunter Little Red, that's two big troublemakers, Lynn said, blinking and seemingly unbothered by the awkwardness, maintaining a serious expression. As long as I'm not embarrassed, there's no embarrassment. Someone seems very self-aware, Medici mocked, glancing at Lynn. The ancient sun god was taken aback but then chuckled, turning to Lynn. Regarding the Eye of Secrets, Sorcerer has briefed me. Lynn, let me ask again, are you truly ready to take on the responsibility of Divine Kingdom's education? His expression turned serious and solemn. I can tell you clearly, the future of the Divine Kingdom will far exceed its current scale. I will liberate humanity from the control of the supernatural races, leading humanity to rise again and reclaim the world. If you take on this responsibility, you'll be in charge of educating all humanity in the future. This is no trivial matter. Regardless of your initial intentions, I hope you will consider this carefully. Ah, this, Lynn scratched his head, meeting the ancient sun god's serious gaze. He sighed softly and then became serious himself. I understand your concern. You might not think my temperament is suited for such a significant responsibility, given my lack of steadiness in some aspects. End of the chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Lynn raised his eyes to look at the ancient sun god. The playful demeanor he usually carried was gone, replaced by a deep steadiness that seemed to have accumulated over the years. This version of Lynn drew surprised glances from Sorcerer and Medici, both unable to hide their astonishment. Lynn ignored their gazes and continued to look straight into the eyes of the ancient sun god. Perhaps you think that my desire to establish the Eye of Secrets is just a passing whim. Perhaps you believe that once I digest the potion and find the Eye of Secrets useless, I will abandon it. Or maybe, in your view, I haven't fully realized what it means to want to establish the Eye of Secrets. I admit, I'm not as grand and noble as you are. But I am definitely not someone who shirks responsibility either, Lynn said firmly, his eyes serious. I am fully aware of the weight I am taking on. Even though I dislike heavy workloads, now that I've decided to take on this responsibility, as long as the Divine Kingdom exists, I will fulfill my duty. As long as the people of the Eye of Secrets don't betray me, I will never abandon them. This is my promise. You may question it, but this will always be my answer. Lynn's words were not mere lies to deceive the ancient sun god, he genuinely planned it this way. After all, he needed tools, faith, an anchor, the digestion of potions, and preparations for becoming an above the sequence in the future. So as long as his followers did not abandon him, Lynn naturally would not abandon his followers. Of course, if the Divine Kingdom perished in the future, that would be another matter. At that time, the responsibility for education might not continue, but he would take good care of the people of the Eye of Secrets. Lynn added in his heart. It wasn't that he lacked responsibility, but the situation simply wouldn't allow it. The ancient sun god quietly listened to Lynn's words. His golden eyes scrutinized Lynn, seemingly pondering something or merely observing him. A few seconds later, the ancient sun god nodded and said, I apologize. I shouldn't have doubted your determination. Since you are prepared, go ahead. I will support you. Hearing this, Sorcerer breathed a slight sigh of relief but couldn't help rubbing his temples. He knew very well that these words from Lord meant that Lynn's Eye of Secrets would enter the formal establishment phase. Undoubtedly, this meant that Sorcerer would have to work overtime again. After all, logically, the Lord needed to assign a trusted and capable person to assist Lynn. And apart from himself, Sorcerer couldn't think of anyone else suitable. This made Sorcerer sigh. For a moment, he really felt he should protest to his lord about his overloaded workload and perhaps request a few competent assistants. Although Leodoro and the others were not particularly good at this, as Lynn had said, even Medici, a child of the Red Priest pathway, could manage the work well. If they were truly determined to learn, it might not be impossible. Sorcerer thought distractedly. Then he heard the warm voice of the ancient sun god. However, considering the workload and your lack of experience in handling such matters, if you don't mind, I hope to send a deputy to assist you. Is that all right? The ancient sun god asked gently, his attitude not forceful, as if genuinely consulting Lynn. Of course, that's no problem. I've been waiting for someone to help share the workload. Lynn nodded without hesitation and said, of course, I look forward to having help. Then let Ouroboros be your deputy. He will assist you in completing the related work, the ancient sun god said with a smile. Hearing this, Lynn instinctively glanced at Sasria, then looked shocked at the ancient sun god, confirming, Ouroboros. What the hell? Ouroboros is a deputy, are you sure he's not going to mess things up? Sasria also frowned slightly at this moment. Though having a less burdened workload was nice, even Sasria felt that Ouroboros might not be suitable as Lynn's deputy. Ads by PubFuture. Sasria knew Lynn's character too well. A deputy should be mature, stable, and capable, able to somewhat curb Lynn's erratic ideas. Even if not himself, it should be Akas's. Medici also looked at the ancient sun god with confusion. Over the past few days, he had interacted with Ouroboros a few times, and the deepest impression was, that's one dumb snake. If not for certain concerns, Medici could have easily fooled that dumb snake into being sold and counting money for him. Sending such a character to assist Lynn. Just thinking about it, Medici felt it was unreliable. Originally, I planned for Sasria to assist you, but now I think you were right. Sasria's workload is indeed too heavy. Some tasks should be delegated to others, the ancient sun god said seriously, his warm smile unchanged, but his words were icy and piercing. Lynn, sorry, I was wrong. Please let Sasria, the dependable caretaker, share my work, thank you. Medici's expression turned peculiar, and he muttered audibly, reap what you sow. By the way, he had learned this saying from Lynn. Red, it's time to test our brotherhood. Put aside your red legion of war and help me establish the Eye of Secrets. Lynn wrapped his arm tightly around Medici's neck, applying enough force that if Medici were not a mythological creature, he might have suffocated. Lynn's smile was bright, filled with a sense of reason, or else, I'll beat you up. Medici. DBKDB, second epic profanity. Today, Medici still wanted to beat up his brother. All right, stop fooling around in front of the Lord. This is too disrespectful. Seeing the two about to fight again, Sasria quickly intervened, pulling the two apart before looking at the ancient sun god and saying, I apologize. It's my lack of discipline that allowed these two children to act so presumptuously. It's all right. I know you can't control them, and I never expected you to make Lynn a well-behaved child. That was unrealistic from the start. As far as caring goes, you've done well, the ancient sun god said warmly, as if comforting, though the words were so blunt that Sasria was unsure how to express gratitude. End of this chapter. So, you handed these two children over to me knowing exactly how troublesome they are. Sasria sighed inwardly. In the end, he could only pretend he hadn't heard anything and change the subject. Is it appropriate to have Ouroboros assist Lynn? I know Ouroboros is not incapable, he has always performed well in logistics and promoting the faith. But if he is to assist Lynn, shouldn't we send someone with a more appropriate temperament? Sasria asked diplomatically. Sasria didn't doubt Ouroboros' abilities. Although he had never had his help with official duties, he was one of the few in the high ranks of the Divine Kingdom who could help Sasria with more than just fighting. Before today, Ouroboros was always responsible for logistics and faith promotion. However, Sasria saw Ouroboros' temperament as a significant issue. While he might be suitable for other tasks or even assisting Sasria himself, he wasn't fit to be Lynn's deputy. Regarding temperament, I have considered it. In fact, I chose Ouroboros precisely because of Lynn's personality, the ancient sun god said, his expression becoming slightly more serious. The previous comment was just a joke. From the beginning, I never intended for you, Sasria, to assist Lynn. I have other plans for you. I know you might think Akas's would be a more suitable deputy, the ancient sun god paused before continuing, but I have a different view on this. I believe Lynn would not want Akas's as his deputy, correct? Hearing this, Lynn glanced at the ancient sun god and then seriously nodded. if I have to choose between Akas's and Ouroboros, I would indeed prefer Ouroboros. Sasrier was stunned by this. The ancient sun god was not surprised. He looked at Lynn and said, Ouroboros should be in his atelier now. Would you like to see him? Does he know about becoming my assistant? Lynn asked. I haven't informed him yet. Perhaps it's better if you tell him personally, the ancient sun god said warmly. All right then. It's been a while since I last saw Ouroboros. I'll go now. Goodbye. Lynn nodded and left, realizing that the ancient sun god was determined to have Ouroboros assist him. Lynn decided not to resist further. Thinking it over, Ouroboros would indeed make a good assistant. With his personality, he would definitely do whatever Lynn said. While not as capable as Sasrier, Sasrier had many other responsibilities and might not have the energy to focus on the Eye of Secrets. In contrast, Ouroboros was the perfect tool person. Lynn thought and felt more spirited. With Ouroboros as a lucky charm, any difficult decisions could be guided by fate. Lynn suddenly felt that Ouroboros as a deputy was quite good, making him walk briskly and hum a tune as he left the study. Watching Lynn's retreating figure, Sasrier turned his gaze back to the ancient sun god and couldn't help but say, Lord, I still don't understand. This is the best choice. The ancient sun god looked at his avatar warmly and said unhurriedly, that child does not need a deputy who would discipline him. The Eye of Secrets does not need someone who would override Lynn. Ouroboros is the best choice. Hearing this, Sasrier was momentarily stunned, finally understanding. He had been somewhat biased, thinking that due to Lynn's unreliable nature, he needed a mature and steady deputy to discipline him. But in fact, regardless of how the Eye of Secrets developed, it would always be Lynn's domain. Such a place clearly did not need an overly strong deputy. Considering everything, Ouroboros was indeed the best choice. His personality ensured he wouldn't interfere with Lynn's decisions, and his loyalty guaranteed that if Lynn made a mistake, they could catch it in time. I understand. Your vision is indeed far-sighted, Sasrier said respectfully. The ancient sun god neither confirmed nor denied this. He then looked at the silent Medici and said, regarding the Red Army, Sasrier has also reported to me. While the ancient sun god and Medici discussed the Red Army, Lynn finally arrived at Ouroboros' studio. Knock, knock, knock. Lynn knocked politely. A few seconds later, the door opened, and Ouroboros appeared. He was still dressed in a simple linen robe, with silver-white hair stained with blue paint. Holding a paintbrush, his pretty silver eyes showed a hint of surprise upon seeing Lynn. He asked, Is there something you need? Ads by PubFuture. How should I put it? From now on, you're with me, Lynn said bluntly, you're my deputy. Ouroboros was obviously taken aback, looking confused for a few seconds before seriously asking, Is this the Lord's command? Yes, I am establishing a department called the Eye of Secrets, and you are, the Lord's personally appointed deputy. Lynn nodded while glancing at the paintings in Ouroboros' atelier. Just a glance and his eyes lit up. He almost forgot Ouroboros was also a painting enthusiast. Lynn reaffirmed his previous thought. Ouroboros might indeed make an excellent deputy. At least, they shared the same hobby. I see. I will do my best as your deputy, Ouroboros said slowly, after thinking for a few seconds. That was easy to convince. Although I didn't lie, it feels like he's too easy to fool. Lynn rubbed his chin, looking at the dazed Ouroboros in front of him. Suddenly, he said, Ouroboros, I have a favor to ask. What is it? Ouroboros looked at Lynn in confusion. I'd like to borrow a drop of your blood. As a sage, I need to analyze the blood of mythical creatures to gain knowledge. So, I hope you can give me a drop of your blood, Lynn said seriously. Oh, Ouroboros nodded slowly and said, all right. Thank you. You're a good snake, Lynn praised without hesitation. Looking at Ouroboros' atelier, he smiled and said, in exchange, let me tour your atelier. I also love painting. Though Ouroboros didn't quite understand why a tour was a return favor, as a fellow painting enthusiast, he didn't mind showing others his atelier. So, he nodded and said, come in. End of chapter. It must be said, Although Ouroboros is really quite clueless, his level of skill in painting is truly impressive. Whether in pure technique or in the essence of his works, Ouroboros' paintings belong to the category where both insiders and outsiders would be awed at first glance. Lynn couldn't help but suspect that this angel of the Wheel of Fortune pathway might have accidentally allocated all his skill points to painting instead of other abilities at birth. Really impressive, even compared to me, he's only a little behind, Lynn said, rubbing his chin and marveling, shameless as always. Sitting quietly beside him, Ouroboros glanced at Lynn with a slightly hesitant expression. After several seconds, he asked, "Can I see your paintings?" His eyes showed curiosity. Clearly, despite his clueless personality and lack of interest in many things, Ouroboros had a subjective initiative when it came to the field of painting. "My previous works are out of the question, but I can draw one for you on the spot. I happen to have a piece I've been wanting to complete and share with others," Lynn said, suddenly having a brilliant idea. He smiled mischievously, though not directed at Ouroboros, but at a certain unborn raven. "Can I borrow your art supplies?" Hearing this, Ouroboros nodded, "No problem." Under Ouroboros' gaze, Lynn hummed a tune while drawing, Amon crying. For once, Lynn abandoned his usual fairytale style with cute animals, opting for an oil painting style that emphasized realism, striving for a 200% accurate portrayal of a teary-eyed young Amon. Ouroboros watched quietly as Lynn's painting gradually took shape. After the painting was complete, he asked somewhat confusedly, "Is this child related to us in the future?" As a soothsayer of the Wheel of Fortune pathway at Sequence 2, Ouroboros could foresee the future to some extent. Although normally, at Sequence 2, he wouldn't be able to foresee anything related to Amon, as it was too distant. But when Lynn drew this future-related painting, the prophet ability gave Ouroboros a hint from fate. "He is indeed related to us." Lynn put down his brush, his expression suddenly heavy and his tone slightly sorrowful. "In the future I foresaw, Medici died because of him." This wasn't wrong, as the three main culprits in the hot pot incident were the Blood Emperor Tudor, Adam, and Amon. Ouroboros paused, feeling a bit confused, as the hint from fate didn't seem to match what he was hearing. But his personality made him unlikely to doubt Lynn, whom the ancient sun god personally brought back, raised by Saussure, and who was now his superior. After hesitating for over 10 seconds, Ouroboros decided to ask directly, "Is this child our enemy?" "Strictly speaking, not completely," Lynn sighed, skillfully using vague language to obscure the truth. He continued, "So, Ouroboros, I have a rather unreasonable request regarding this painting." Ouroboros was puzzled but replied, "What kind of request?" "I'd like you to help me complete a painting collection and ensure they are preserved for a long time. I plan to create many works about this child in the future. I hope these paintings can be preserved alongside your works and be passed down for generations, known to many." Lynn displayed a lonely expression as he spoke, as if self-deprecating, "This is my small way of taking revenge on that child." Yes, it should be clear to everyone that Lynn's brilliant idea was to socially destroy Amon throughout history. Paintings like Amon crying, Amon being hit, and Amon exploding were all future works Lynn planned to create, aiming to spread Amon's black history from all angles. Although Lynn knew that Amon, as a mythological creature without normal human sensibilities, wouldn't be affected by shame like ordinary people, there would still be some effect. Through his interactions with Amon, Lynn had already realized that the little raven did have a sense of shame, or he wouldn't have shown emotional fluctuations from Lynn's taunts. So, causing a historical social death, with every embarrassing moment known to high-ranking Beyonders, would surely make even Amon feel the brotherly love from a different father and mother. Ads by PubFuture. Although this might bring some risk to Ouroboros, it wasn't a big issue. After all, Ouroboros was an angel king of the Wheel of Fortune pathway and always stayed by the true creator's side. Amon wouldn't likely target Ouroboros for this. Besides, the grudge was clearly directed at Lynn. Lynn thought, glancing guiltily at Ouroboros. Unaware of the feud between Lynn and the little raven, Ouroboros looked at Lynn's self-deprecating expression and instinctively pursed his lips. Ouroboros felt that Lynn seemed very sad but didn't know how to comfort him. Seeing his brother's fate and unable to personally avenge him, only able to express dissatisfaction and vent anger through these tarnishing paintings. Ouroboros found it cruel. Prophecies are not set in stone. I believe that since you have seen everything in advance, you can save Medici. After a while, Ouroboros finally found the words, speaking seriously. Although not eloquent, Ouroboros' sincere eyes showed he genuinely wanted to comfort Lynn, not just make empty remarks. This sincerity flustered Lynn, who was immersed in his act and intent on persecuting Amon. Used to handling insincere flattery and performing shameless acts, genuine concern caught him off guard. But Lynn, always adaptive, quickly adjusted his mood and smiled. I also believe I can change that future. TN. He is taking revenge on another level, rolling on the floor laughing. Dot, 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 dot. End of chapter. Seeing this, Ouroboros also felt relieved, believing that his comfort had worked. He then looked at the Amon crying painting Lynn had created and seriously replied, I can agree to your request, but I can't guarantee these paintings will be passed down for a long time. After a pause, Ouroboros added, but if you allow, if your originals are destroyed in the future, I can help you reproduce these paintings. You seem to want to tarnish the perpetrator's reputation with these paintings, although I think the perpetrator might not care about them. In Ouroboros' view, the matter of the paintings was minor. Even if the crying child's black history really spread out, it wouldn't matter much. After all, Ouroboros himself didn't care much if some of his childhood embarrassments were shared. He would rather spend the time quietly painting a few more pieces. Go ahead and reproduce them. If possible, hand the reproductions over to Amon, but be sure to tell him they were painted by me, Lynn said almost without hesitation. He could hardly wait to see Ouroboros hand over the collection of Amon's Black History paintings to Amon in the fifth epic. That would be truly delightful. If I have the opportunity, I will. Ouroboros nodded, not considering it a big deal. He just looked at Lynn with some confusion and asked, but I don't understand why you want me to do these things. Can't you do them yourself? Well, theoretically, I could do it myself, but that would be too slow, Lynn replied with a smile, looking at Ouroboros. Some things can only be done by you. Ouroboros frowned in confusion. He didn't quite understand what Lynn meant, but since Ouroboros had never been one to overthink, he simply said, although I don't fully understand, since you've entrusted this to me, I'll do my best to complete it. After all, fate didn't warn him against it. Ouroboros, you are indeed a good snake, Lynn praised Ouroboros without hesitation and then remembered something. Oh, I almost forgot the main task. Would you like to visit the future Eye of Secrets first batch of students with me? They're a lovely bunch of children, and you will inevitably interact with them in the future. Why not meet them in advance? Ouroboros was slightly stunned, although he didn't quite understand why the topic had shifted from Amon's paintings to the Eye of Secrets. As the future second in command of the Eye of Secrets, he thought for a moment and then said, all right. Do you need me to add some luck to those children? You reminded me, it would indeed be good to prepare some gifts for them. Lynn said, pinching his chin and recalling the content of the teacher's handbook. How about this? I'll make some protective amulets for them, and you, Ouroboros, could create some lucky charms to bring them good fortune. What is a lucky charm? Ouroboros asked in confusion. A lucky charm, strictly speaking, isn't exactly a spell. But that's not important. You can think of it as making small trinkets and then adding some luck to them to protect the wearer. That would be a lucky charm, Lynn explained. But wouldn't it be more convenient to directly add luck to them? Ouroboros asked, somewhat puzzled. He then seemed to realize something and said, I see, it's to make the effect of the luck last longer, right? You can understand it that way, but it's more about a sense of ceremony. It's also a way to express our best wishes for them, Lynn smiled. Ouroboros blinked, seeming to understand yet still somewhat confused. So it's a good thing, right? Yes, exactly, Lynn confirmed with a nod. Following Lynn's suggestion, the two of them gathered various materials to make lucky charms and protective amulets and began crafting the gifts. Ads by PubFuture. Since the Eye of Secrets was in its early stages, and Lynn was quite meticulous about his first batch of students, the number of selected members was only about 20 or 30, so this task was quite manageable. Of course, There were only a few dozen now, but that didn't mean there would always be so few. This was just the initial core group that Lynn had carefully selected from many people. Later, he would definitely expand the team. Like the Tarot Club, though it started with only a few members, by the second part of the Lordofthemysteries, each Tarot Club member had developed their own network. In the early stages, having a small team was normal. Expansion would come later. Lynn planned to grow the Eye of Secrets into a large organization that could support the entire Divine Kingdom's educational operations. For now, his task was to lay a solid foundation for this organization. That afternoon, at the temporary base of the Eye of Secrets, all the students received 2 gifts: a pendant carved in the shape of a cute husky, and a square jade plaque with a snake pattern on the back and the word, "Peace," engraved on the front. They also met Lynn, who distributed the gifts with a smile, patiently explaining their functions and uses, along with Ouroboros, who stood quietly by his side. When one student bravely asked why Lynn was giving them these items, Lynn blinked and then smiled warmly, saying, "It's a blessing. Today's 2 gifts actually contain my and Ouroboros' best wishes for you. May you no longer be trapped in past hardships and embrace a bright future. I hope each of you can protect yourselves with your own strength and have enough luck to live safely in this dangerous world," Lynn said, looking at the children and young people, most of whom were under 20 years old, with a serious and gentle expression. "This world is harsh, but regardless, we must continue to struggle and survive. So I hope I can give you, my dear students, a little bit of your teacher's blessing and help. I hope that in the future, you can all stand tall. Remember, you are students of Lynn. You are no longer people who can only wait despairingly for death when facing danger. I will teach you how to protect yourselves, how to wield power. I will give you a future filled with hope." End of chapter. I will give you all a hopeful future. Upon hearing Lynn's words, all the members of the Eye of Secrets fell silent. Some bowed their heads, others clenched their gifts tightly, and a few stared blankly at Lynn. Before today, even after being rescued to the Divine Kingdom, escaping their previously precarious lives, and being selected as the first batch of students for the Eye of Secrets, these students remained confused and fearful about their future. Hope and future had never been part of their vocabulary until today. No one had ever told them with such conviction that they too could have hope, a future, and the power to protect themselves. That they could live truly as people, not as objects or food. "Your Highness Lynn," suddenly, one of the students spoke up. It was a girl about 13 or 14 years old. She was clearly very nervous but managed to control it as she asked, "Can we really have power like those demonic wolves? I want to protect myself. I don't want to just cry when facing those monsters." "Of course you can. But I must clarify that this path will be dangerous, fraught with madness and loss of control. If anyone is afraid, you can leave now without any worries. Even if you choose to leave, I will ensure you're taken care of," Lynn said, comforting the girl with a smile before turning serious. "I'm not afraid. No matter how dangerous it is, it can't be worse than before," the girl replied, biting her lip with determination. "What about the rest of you? Does anyone want to leave?" Lynn asked, looking at the others. No one spoke or stepped back. Even the little rascal who had first dared to ask Lynn a question now raised his hand and said, "Teacher, we're not afraid of danger. We're only afraid of helplessly awaiting death when it comes." His words echoed Lynn's earlier statement, fitting perfectly. Encouraged, the others also started to express their resolve. "Right, I'm not afraid. Although I'm a bit scared, what if we meet the demonic wolves again? I don't want to be eaten." "Yeah, the demonic wolves are terrifying. I don't want to be eaten either, so having power is better." Most of their words were simple, as they hadn't received a good education. Lynn listened quietly to their speeches. Once everyone had spoken, he lightly coughed. Instantly, everyone fell silent, no one making a sound. This wasn't due to good discipline but rather an inherent fear of powerful beings. This made Lynn feel complicated for a moment, but he soon smiled and said, "Since no one is backing down, welcome, little ones, to embrace a new future with me." Just a motivational speech to better win their hearts, but in the end, I was the one who got more moved. Well, Since I've decided to be their teacher, I'll fulfill my responsibility. In the fifth epic, Lynn, while multitasking with several Smurf accounts and adjusting the makeup of his divine incarnation, thought about his freshly recruited students with a sense of sentiment. But soon, his wandering thoughts brought him to other matters, such as Ouroboros, and a certain little snake who loved ice cream. Ads by PubFuture. I wonder if Ouroboros will remember our agreement and stick to it. Even if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. As long as the second epic's plan works out, everything should spread as intended. I hope Amon isn't too surprised by these gifts. Thinking this, Lynn couldn't help but smile brightly. He loved to torment Amon, not just because of the past grudges but also because Amon reminded him of someone. Although he had no specific memories, Lynn was certain he had encountered someone similar to Amon before and had suffered deeply. While it's wrong to take it out on others, Lynn was petty, and Amon had a talent for causing trouble. Taking it out on Amon didn't feel wrong, it felt like doing a public service. Lynn even dared to say that anyone familiar with Amon, knowing his deeds, would applaud his actions, possibly even Amon's brother. After all, everyone had long awaited someone even more troublesome than Amon to discipline him. Yes, Lynn was very aware of his own nature, aware that he was like a mischievous husky. And he had no intention of changing that. After some schadenfreude over the misfortune that would befall Amon, Lynn then considered Lordofthemysteries, who was likely on the verge of restarting, if not already having done so. To be honest, due to the original story, Lynn had a basic level of goodwill towards Will. And now, with Ouroboros as his deputy, Lynn was even more interested. He felt he should meet Will, to give a bit of a scare to the young snake of fate. But don't get it wrong, Lynn had no intention of catching Will for Ouroboros. For now, Lynn had no desire to get involved in the struggle between the two snakes of fate. Why? Simply because he wasn't that close to them. Lynn hadn't even met Will, and while he didn't dislike Ouroboros after meeting him twice, their relationship was only that of ordinary friends at best. Lynn had no intention of getting involved in their fight for Sequence 0. Such battles were no joke, one misstep could mean risking everything. Lynn hadn't even laid out his own plans for Godhood yet, he didn't have time to meddle in others' sequence battles. If it were Medici, Lynn would help without hesitation. But with these two, he preferred to keep things amicable and help in other ways if necessary. He was quite experienced in this kind of diplomacy. Whether Lynn's stance would shift in the future and whether he would choose to support one side over the other was a matter for later. That was a concern for the distant future. End of the chapter. However, based on Lynn's understanding of himself, even if he got acquainted with the two serpents later, he would probably still not take sides, since both sides were important to him. At most, he would try to save the losing serpent's life when the time came. From this perspective, having a friend like me is really a lucky thing, Lynn shamelessly sighed. He then became more serious and divided part of his consciousness into the divine incarnation's body. He was going to empty Mr. Fool's wallet. Defending the halo of poverty, starting now. Meanwhile, deep within the forsaken land of the gods. This was an originally unremarkable mountain peak, but it was unique in that at its summit stood a gigantic cross, existing between reality and illusion. Not only that, but a blurred figure hung upside down from this enormous cross. Ancient wooden stakes pierced through the figure's body, stained with blood that still flowed without dripping, nailing it to the cross. At the base of the cross, Ouroboros, who had been praying with closed eyes, suddenly opened them. His gaze revealed a trace of confusion, as if he had encountered something he couldn't understand. Ouroboros then looked up at the true Creator on the cross and said, "Lord, I dreamt of him again." This time, Ouroboros then recounted his memory in detail, without embellishment or omission, and finally asked with a puzzled tone, "Should I honor my promise to him?" The true Creator listened quietly. He did not speak, but Ouroboros seemed to hear something, his expression becoming enlightened. "I understand, Lord, I will deliver that painting to Amon," Ouroboros said reverently, bowing his head. The true Creator looked at him in silence. Under his gaze, Ouroboros lifted his head, seeming hesitant and conflicted. But ultimately, Ouroboros asked, "Lord, do you think he will change Medici's fate?" If there was anything significant in Ouroboros's life, The Red Angel Medici would undoubtedly be one of them. Even the slow-witted Angel of Destiny had been silent for a long time after learning of Medici's demise. Since then, Ouroboros rarely interacted with Amon and Adam. He did not hate Amon and Adam because they were the Lord's offspring, but it was hard for Ouroboros to convince himself not to mind it. The true creator still did not answer, but Ouroboros seemed to receive a response. You don't know either. Ouroboros lowered his eyes, his mood appearing somewhat downcast. However, this mood did not last long, as Ouroboros soon stood up, ready to replicate the painting from his memory. He would meticulously reproduce it and personally deliver it to Amon. Would this count as a small revenge on Amon? Ouroboros recalled Lynn's words to him, blinking in confusion. Come, Sherlock, let me introduce you. This is Mr. Secret Keeper, the craftsman who will be creating your Beyonder item. At 15 Minsk Street, in the familiar living room, 3 figures sat on either side of the coffee table. One side was the host, Klein. The other side was the guest, Lynn, and his newly formed divine incarnation. At this moment, Lynn was enthusiastically making introductions. He first introduced his divine incarnation to Klein, then, pretending to be formal, introduced Klein to the divine incarnation. Mr. Secret Keeper, this is my friend, Detective Sherlock. He has a Sequence 6 devil characteristic that he wants you to craft into an item. You can discuss the specifics with him. Hello, Mr. Secret Keeper, I am Sherlock Moriarty. Klein introduced himself while instinctively scrutinizing the craftsman before him. This was a man who appeared to be in his 30s or 40s, dressed in a proper suit, with deep-set features and amber eyes, exuding an elegant aura, clearly well-educated. To be honest, if not for Lynn's introduction, Klein would have had a hard time associating this gentleman with a craftsman. The man looked more like a scholarly academic. However, there was a strange sense of familiarity. Klein felt a flicker of doubt. Of course, Klein did not know that this sense of familiarity was a result of Lynn's deliberate design when creating the divine incarnation's persona. This was part of Lynn's hidden script. On the surface, his angelic and craftsman identities were separate, but in his hidden script, they were actually the same entity, the Angel of Secrets. In this narrative, the Angel of Secrets went to great lengths for his human counterpart, acting as a cryptic guide to promote the counterpart's progress while also crafting items for him and even his friends when necessary. It could be said he played the roles of both a father and mother to perfection. Yes, the inspiration for this came from Saussure. Lynn set things up this way to pave the way for his divine incarnation to possess abilities from 2 different pathways in the future. As to why the divine incarnation could have abilities from 2 pathways, don't ask Lynn. Lynn was just a small, helpless, and forgetful human. He knew nothing. After the introductions and some polite small talk, Klein and Lynn's divine incarnation quickly got down to business. Klein took out a metal box and opened it to reveal the Devil's Sequence 6 characteristic inside. He said, "This is the Beyonder characteristic I would like you to craft. It comes from a Sequence 6 Devil Dog. I hope you can create it as perfectly as possible." Klein did not hide anything, as anyone with some information and brains could make connections at this point when asking a craftsman to work with a Sequence 6 demon characteristic. Moreover, Lynn had assured him that this craftsman was reliable. Klein had a lot of trust in Lynn. Lynn has informed me in advance. As long as your payment is sufficient, I will give you a most perfect creation. Lynn controlled the divine incarnation to say this. Then, the divine incarnation picked up the demon characteristic from the box, examined it for a few seconds, and then returned it, asking, "What kind of weapon do you wish to receive?" End of the chapter. What kind of weapon do you want? I hope to get a firearm-type mystical item, and I want it to have as much attack power as possible. However, I don't want its negative effects to influence my personality, like making me cold-blooded or anything. Facing the question from Mr. Secret Keeper, Klein, who had already thought about what kind of weapon he wanted, quickly began describing his various requirements. Lynn quietly listened to him, then controlled his divine avatar to nod and say, "I can meet all your requirements. As for the price, it will be 2,000 gold pounds. Can you accept that?" So expensive. Klein's heart bled, but he still gritted his teeth and nodded. "Okay, do you want cash or a bank transfer?" He had researched the cost of crafting Sequence 6 mystical items. Normally, it ranges from 700 to 1,000 pounds if it's not through a friend. Moreover, because craftsmen are very rare, even though there's a market price, it's hard to actually find someone to craft for you, and there's often a premium on the price. Klein had confirmed that normally, even if you pay 1,000 pounds to craft an Abyss Pathway mystical item, it often has significant negative effects. In comparison, if spending an extra 1,000 pounds can eliminate these negative effects and maximize the ability, it's definitely worth it. Furthermore, an excellent Sequence 6 mystical item with very low negative effects can easily be worth 10,000 gold pounds. So this isn't just spending money, it's an investment. Klein consoled himself internally and then heard Mr. Secret Keeper say, "Cash, I believe you have prepared it." "Yes." Klein nodded. He then took out his wallet, counted out a stack of gold pounds from his bag, reluctantly looked at the money that had not even warmed his hand, and handed it over. After handing over this sum, Klein's wallet only had a few bills left. Successfully guarding the poor god's aura, yay! Lynn almost laughed out loud seeing Klein's shriveled wallet. But Lynn wasn't guilty at all because, although he was deliberately emptying Klein's wallet, the mystical item he would craft for Klein would be worth the price. After all, normally, if 2,000 pounds could get you a Sequence 2 Knowledge Magister to make you a mystical item, anyone with the money wouldn't pass up the chance. So Lynn, who wasn't guilty, then controlled his divine avatar to say, "Is there a vacant room?" "Yes, there's a guest room on the second floor." Klein, snapping out of his heartache for the money, nodded and looked at Mr. Secret Keeper in confusion, not understanding why he suddenly asked this. "Good, lead me there. I will finish crafting the mystical item within 2 hours. Do not disturb me during this time." Lynn controlled his divine avatar to speak calmly. "So fast, I thought it would take days. Could it be that Mr. Secret Keeper is of a high sequence? Lynn actually knows such a high sequence craftsman. Could he be another old friend like the Angel of Secrets?" Klein was stunned, his mind racing with various thoughts, but he still nodded and quickly said, "No problem, please follow me." Lynn leisurely watched Klein lead his divine avatar to the vacant room. Once the door was closed and Klein left, Lynn controlled his divine avatar to begin crafting, borrowing the power of his second persona. Of course, this time Lynn was careful to restrain himself, ensuring no major disturbances would be caused. Since he was borrowing the power of the divine avatar, Lynn's main body remained weak, helpless, and stuck at Sequence 8. Meanwhile, Lynn, controlling his divine avatar to start working in the room, turned his attention to Klein, who had returned to the first floor. He smiled and raised his coffee cup. "So, how is it? Is the person I introduced reliable?" "Seems reliable so far, but it's really expensive." Klein nodded and then couldn't help but mutter softly. "No choice, as Emperor Russell said, you get what you pay for. Normally, spending this money to get a well-functioning mystical item without much negative effect is a luxury." Lynn said cheerfully, hiding the fact that he was the one emptying Klein's wallet. Lynn then seemed to remember something and asked, "By the way, how did that previous commission go?" "I've completed that commission." Klein was a bit puzzled as to why Lynn suddenly brought up the infidelity investigation but nodded. "So you've joined the Quelaag Club?" Lynn asked, rubbing his chin. "How do you know?" Klein looked at Lynn in surprise. "I don't think I told you the details of the commission." Klein was professional and wouldn't reveal commission details without Mary Gale's permission, even to a friend like Lynn. Did I not tell you? As an excellent detective, I'm familiar with most of the wealthy merchants, and Mary Gale is barely one of them." Lynn sipped his coffee and continued, "So I know about her husband's affair and that their rendezvous spot is the Quelaag Club." "That's not knowing a bit, that's knowing everything." Klein couldn't help but think, then asked, "Why didn't you take Mary Gale's commission?" "Well, because I don't take infidelity cases." Lynn showed a somewhat hard-to-explain expression, as if recalling some black history. "After all, I'm too good-looking, and taking such cases easily brings extra trouble." This wasn't entirely a lie, as the original owner did encounter troubles due to his looks in infidelity cases. "Ah, I remember now. The file on Lynn Soto's did mention he almost got falsely accused of being a gigolo during an infidelity investigation because of his good looks, causing a lot of trouble. Klein recalled some files he'd read before, understanding Lynn's thoughts and feeling a bit sympathetic. But Klein was still puzzled and said, "But what does this have to do with me joining the Quelaag Club?" End of chapter. It was nothing originally, but Lynn paused here, casting a subtle glance at Klein before continuing. "I saw that guy again yesterday. He told me that if I have the time, I should visit the Quelaag Club. There are some interesting people and things gathered there." Yes, Lynn planned to take Mr. Fool to Blockwell, without any particular reason, mainly using Mr. Fool as bait. After all, if he went by himself, he might not be able to find that little snake easily. People on the Wheel of Fortune pathway can hide so effortlessly. Hearing this, Klein perked up and quickly asked, "Interesting people and things? Did he tell you who or what?" As for Lynn secretly meeting the angel again, Klein didn't mind. After all, for an angel at Sequence 2, it's easy to decide who to meet or not to meet. Klein had prepared himself to go through numerous preparations and trials to meet the angel again. And this time, it might be the signal from the angel. After all, the angel loves writing scripts and often appears in major events. If Quelaag Club was specifically mentioned, it must have something extraordinary. It might be another big event. Klein muttered inwardly. In Klein's understanding, since the angel's appearance, he has been involved in nothing but major events like the descent of an evil god's offspring or the manifestation of the true creator. Even the demon dog they encountered later turned out to have a complicated background after some insight from Crestet Sesimir. If it weren't confirmed that there was no interference from 008, I would suspect that Lynn and I encountering the devil dog was deliberately guided by the angel. But looking at the result, maybe the angel has always been watching over Lynn, which is why the matter with the devil dog was quickly uncovered. Klein thought, watching as Lynn spread his hands. "I don't know. You know he's like, a riddler. That's what Russell's term means, right? I even wanted to ask him about my past, but he only tells me what he wants to say and nothing else," Lynn said through gritted teeth, maintaining his act while speaking. He then looked at Klein. "So I thought of you. I figured as a believer of the Fool, you might have some special information channels, knowing things I don't." "Sorry, but not only do the Fool's believers not know, even the Fool himself doesn't know." Klein retorted inwardly, then said, "I really don't have any information on this, but from your tone, it seems you already have some ideas. I plan to check it out. Although he's indeed a riddler, he's never lied to me about big matters. Since he suggested I visit Quelaag Club, he must have his reasons. So, I'll go and take a look," Lynn said, looking at Klein. "So, Detective Sherlock, interested in being a bodyguard again? After all, I'm just a weak Sequence 8 with pitiful combat skills. If something unexpected happens, I'll need a strong person like you to protect me." As he said this, Lynn spread his hands with a helpless expression, clearly an experienced actor. Klein's mouth twitched, almost instinctively recalling the brutal deaths of Rosago and the demon dog. In terms of sequence, Lynn might not rank high, but in terms of combat power, it's hard to say. After all, Lynn is a pay-to-win warrior. But Lynn's pay-to-win tactics often require teamwork. If he's alone, he might be taken down before he can even throw out a scroll. Lynn probably considered this when deciding to hire me. Klein thought. He didn't plan to refuse Lynn's commission since he intended to explore Quelaag Club himself. However, how much will the commission fee be? Klein asked, hitting the crucial point. It wasn't that he was stingy, but he was indeed short of money. "Aren't we best friends? How can you bear to charge me?" Lynn immediately put on an exaggerated shocked expression, clearly intentional. Then, as if suddenly understanding, he glanced at Klein's empty wallet and said, "Oh, it's because you're broke, right? Poor thing. Don't think I can't see you gloating." Klein tightened his grip on his wallet, feeling his fists clench slightly. He then said expressionlessly, "Russell once said that even brothers should settle accounts clearly. Though our relationship is good, money should still be paid. I understand. It's all for survival, not shameful." Lynn waved his hand, looking as if he understood Klein's poverty. Then he smiled and said, If there's no combat, £50 is a fee for accompanying me. If there's combat or you get inadvertently dragged into danger, we'll determine the fee based on the enemy's strength. Lynn didn't really plan to avoid paying Klein. After all, he had already taken a lot from the poor god and didn't want to push it too far. However, Lynn paused, then added, but I might not have that much money, so if possible, I'd prefer to offset it with Beander knowledge. Lynn was happy to pay, but if Mr. Fool chose knowledge himself, it wouldn't be his responsibility. Hearing this, Klein was tempted. Though he wanted money, he knew Lynn had a lot of secret knowledge that ordinary Beyonders didn't, some of which might be what he needed. Such a tough choice, forget it. I'll decide if combat happens. Klein exhaled, nodding, no problem. The two then discussed the details of visiting Quelaag Club, potential encounters, and shared gossip about the Beander world. When they finished, 2 hours had passed without their notice. Lynn had also multitasked, crafting Klein's mystical item with his divine avatar. Here, this is the mystical item you wanted. Lynn controlled the divine avatar to hand over a seemingly ordinary revolver to Klein across the coffee table, introducing it leisurely. You can name it yourself, but I'll tentatively call it the Devil Revolver. It has 2 modes: support mode and enemy mode. End of chapter. In auxiliary mode, the Devil Pistol fires special bullets that do not harm people. These bullets significantly enhance the body of the person hit, granting them great strength and speed, Lynn explained, controlling the divine avatar. With this enhancement, even an ordinary person can temporarily gain a physique comparable to a Sequence 6 Devil. Additionally, it grants immunity to most toxins and improves physical defense. However, this enhancement only lasts about half an hour. Afterward, the enhanced person will experience a period of weakness that can last from a few hours to several days. If you know any excellent pharmacists, it's best to drink some potions during this time to help you recover faster. Hearing this, Klein's eyes lit up. Physical strength had always been a significant weakness for him. As a seer, his pathway was notably weak in this aspect. His vitality was fragile, and his strength couldn't compare to that of pathways like Hunter. The enhancement mode of the Devil Pistol could partially mitigate these weaknesses. Lynn glanced at Klein and continued, the auxiliary mode's function is that simple. As for the combat mode, the Devil Pistol has 3 sub-modes. In the first sub-mode, the pistol can fire bullets with negative effects like poison, high temperature, or fire. But these bullets are still just regular bullets with special effects. I call this the normal mode. In this mode, the bullets' spiritual consumption is low, making it suitable for fighting ordinary enemies. In the second sub-mode, the pistol's bullets transform into flame and spell attacks, like sulfur fireballs, fire cages, and poisonous steam, which devils might use. You can release these spells using the pistol as a medium. I call this spell mode. It consumes more spirituality than the first mode, Lynn continued. I recommend using it when facing strong enemies. The third sub-mode, which I call death mode, fires bullets that can instantly kill the target, provided the target's sequence isn't strong enough to withstand the death magic of a Sequence 6 Devil. This mode is effective against mid to low sequence enemies, Lynn paused, adding. However, death mode can only be activated once a day and can only generate 1 death bullet per activation. If you miss, the bullet won't take effect. I understand. Thank you for the reminder. Klein nodded, no longer regretting the money he spent on the pistol. Well, maybe just a little. But Klein truly felt his money was well spent. Among the mystical items he knew, none could compare to this Devil Pistol. A typical Sequence 6 mystical item with abilities similar to the auxiliary mode and without significant negative effects would already be considered excellent. The Devil Pistol, however, boasted multiple modes. Based on Klein's understanding of devil abilities from the church, the Devil Pistol encompassed almost all significant abilities of a Sequence 6 Devil, except for the Devil's Danger Intuition. Klein hadn't forgotten the most critical question and asked, what are the negative effects of this Devil Pistol? The negative effects. Lynn, controlling the divine avatar, smiled elegantly and said unhurriedly, this pistol possesses the characteristics of being alive. As a price for using it, you need to tell it a story every night, with you as the main character. Whether the story is true or made up, it doesn't matter, as long as you are the protagonist. Additionally, you must have an audience besides yourself and the pistol while telling the story. This is its only negative effect. Lynn sipped his coffee before continuing. That's the basic situation. You can explore more details yourself. Do you have any other questions? Ads by PubFuture. Do I need to use my real name in these stories? Klein hesitated but asked. Honestly, this negative effect was beyond Klein's expectations. While it wasn't significant, telling stories with himself as the protagonist was somewhat embarrassing. However, this negative effect was indeed minimal. Combined with the Devil Pistol's abilities, the money spent was truly worth it. Klein thought, recalling a poet friend seeking Beander items. Unfortunately, the poet friend didn't have suitable Beander characteristics. Otherwise, he could ask Mr. Fool for help in crafting a mystical item. You don't need to use your real name, but you must use a name you recognize. Lynn, controlling the divine avatar, replied leisurely. For example, a pseudonym you've used for a long time would work. Lynn's real body looked at Klein with a meaningful expression, almost saying, so you used a pseudonym. So, I can use the name Sherlock for the stories. Lynn, what's with that look? Isn't using a pseudonym common these days? Klein, feeling guilty, avoided Lynn's gaze and asked, does the protagonist need to have my traits, or is just a name enough? The protagonist should resemble you and have some of your characteristics. Otherwise, the pistol might sulk and refuse to work. Lynn pointed to the devil pistol in front of Klein and continued. But don't worry, it's not a master-killing pistol. If you don't meet its needs, it will only become unusable and won't harm you. Of course, if you accidentally shoot yourself in combat mode, that's a different story. It doesn't have a feature to protect its holder from harm. Normal people wouldn't make such a mistake. Klein internally retorted but noted this down, deciding to be careful in future battles to avoid such a mishap. Afterward, Klein asked more questions about the devil pistol, and Lynn patiently answered each one. Once all Klein's doubts were resolved, Lynn, controlling the divine avatar, took his leave. End of chapter.